Hi, my name is Zach Pastora, and I'm the Vice President for the Kansas Natural Resource Council, KNRC. And for those who aren't familiar with KNRC, we're a statewide nonprofit organization here in Kansas that's been around since 1981, with a mission to advocate for the protection, preservation, and restoration of the Kansas environment in order to ensure the health and quality of life for all Kansans. I'm excited to join you today for this video series, Making the Connections, Climate Change in Kansas, to talk with you about air quality and the climate. Now, because I like talking about air, you might call me an airhead. But really, breathing good quality air is something that we all should care about because it directly impacts our health and quality of life. Makes sense, right? Well, fortunately, we can all breathe a little easier these days because many of the harmful air pollutants have gone down, both nationally and in Kansas, thanks to the Clean Air Act and important regulations administered by the Environmental Protection Agency. Across America, the Clean Air Act, implemented in Congress in 1970, today regulates 6 primary air pollutants, known otherwise as criteria pollutants. And they are ozone, caused by volatile organic compounds that react, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, lead, sulfur dioxide, and nitrous oxide. Now, these common air pollutants are known to cause significant harm to human health and the environment. Broad-range health effects include heart disease and heart attacks, respiratory diseases and asthma, cancer, reproductive harm, and even premature death. Environmental impacts include harm to health and wildlife, of livestock, water acidification, climate effects, and overall damage to our ecosystem. It isn't good. And according to Dr. Larry Erickson, former K-State professor, current KNRC president, and author of several books dealing with air quality, energy emissions, and public health, the global social cost of air pollution is at least $3 trillion a year because of illness and premature deaths caused by combustion emissions. Now, these common air pollutants come from a variety of different man-made sources, including stationary fuel combustion like electric and gas power plants, vehicles, industrial sites, and other transportation and equipment sources. Naturally occurring emissions can also result from wildfires and volcanoes. Now, over the years, government regulations and technological advances have helped clean up our air dramatically. Government-led initiatives to take lead out of gasoline, mandated pollution control technologies on power plants and industrial facilities, as well as technological gains in clean energy like wind and solar, and cleaner emitting consumer products have all helped to reduce harmful air emissions. Nationwide, since 1970, these 6 criteria pollutants combined have dropped a whopping 74%, despite energy consumption, population, and vehicle miles, GDP all increasing significantly. Now check these numbers out. From 1990 to 2018, U.S. carbon monoxide fell 74%. Lead dropped 97% overall and 82% since 2010. Nitrogen dioxide was cut in half. Ozone is down 21%. Particulate matter 10 decreased 26%, while particulate matter 2.5 dropped 39% since 2000. And finally, sulfur dioxide fell 89%. These emission reductions corresponded with a significant drop of the number of unhealthy air quality days in the last 2 decades as well. This is great for America because fewer unhealthy air quality days means better health, longevity, and quality of life for all of us. So the story of these 6 regulated air pollutants is a really good one for the country. The same is true for Kansas. Overall, we see that Kansas follows the same trend with a reduction among these criteria pollutants. Now, our biggest single source of these harmful air pollutants in Kansas has come from electricity producing power plants. Our biggest utility in Kansas, Evergy, has dropped sulfur dioxide 98% and nitrous oxide 87% from 2005 levels. That's incredible. However, Kansas, the United States, and the world are facing another challenge when it comes to air quality. It's perhaps the next air pollutant to soon be regulated, carbon dioxide, or CO2. Carbon dioxide, the seemingly harmless air we expel from our lungs and that plants naturally absorb, has become harmful in the sense that because we have so much of it now trapped in our atmosphere, it has become a greenhouse gas, trapping heat and causing unprecedented climatic problems. What we commonly know as today is climate change. Of all the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide is by far the most common greenhouse gas, encompassing 82% of total emissions. Overall, over the last 50 years, our country's carbon emissions have rose 22% according to the EPA, but only 4% in the last 30 years, meaning we may be generally stabilizing our carbon dioxide output. However, globally, the contrast is stark. CO2 emissions globally have increased tenfold since the turn of the century. Overall, over the last 50 years, our country's carbon emissions have rose 22% according to the EPA, and only 4% in the last 30 years, meaning we are generally stabilizing our carbon dioxide output. However, globally, the contrast is stark. CO2 emissions on the global level have increased tenfold since year 1900, and in the last 30 years, global carbon dioxide emissions have risen 90%. Now, our concentration of carbon in the atmosphere have reached over 400 parts per million, resulting in an average rise in air temperature by 2 to 3 degrees and climbing. Now, I know while this temperature increase may not appear to seem like much, it means a big difference in our planet. This temperature swing from climate change has caused our oceans to warm and become more acidic, our ice caps to melt and waters to rise, and extreme weather disasters of flooding, severe storms, droughts, wildfires, wind damage, and more are happening all across the planet. Most of the carbon pollution we emit across Kansas, the U.S., and the world comes from burning fossil fuels for heat, power, and transportation. Fortunately, Kansas can serve as a good example when it comes to reducing CO2. Since 2005, Kansas has dropped this chief greenhouse gas by 19%, and now it's at the lowest point it's been in 40 years. In Kansas, 40% of CO2 is emitted by the electric sector, 30% by transportation, and 20% from industrial facilities. So it makes sense that a big reason for Kansas's reduction of CO2, as I said, 19% since 2005, is because of our lessened dependence on using coal for electricity and replacing that energy with Kansas homegrown clean energy like wind power. By our state's utilities switching to Kansas wind instead of Wyoming coal, Kansas leads the country in terms of our percentage of power coming from wind. And our biggest utility, Evergy, has correspondingly dropped its carbon emissions by 40% since 2005. However, Kansas has much more room for improvement in reducing its CO2 output. We can continue to cut carbon in our electric sector by continuing to pursue clean energy strategies like renewables, energy efficiency, and energy storage. The Sunflower State can also improve in the transportation sector. Carbon emissions from the transportation sector in Kansas, 30%, as I said earlier, has largely been unchanged since 1980. Transportation accounts for a major part of our CO2 emissions nationwide, too. If Kansas, as well as the country, can utilize cleaner transportation options like electric vehicles that use renewables, more public transit like buses and passenger rail, cleaner interstate shipping like freight rail and maritime transport, and alternative transportation by biking and walking, all that can help improve our carbon emissions, air quality, and thus public health and environmental protection. The United States and Kansas have had tremendous success over the last half century in reducing its traditional air pollutants through government regulation and technological innovation. Now it's time to do the same with carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. We can continue to make our energy and industrial facilities and transportation sectors more sustainable with carbon-free, renewable energy sources that will improve the quality of air, our health, our environment, and quality of life. But these improvements will also spell important gains in our economy, create jobs, and help the world globally as well. Thank you for listening. On behalf of the Kansas Natural Resource Council, I, Zach Pastora, appreciate your attention to this presentation. And remember, it pays to care about the air.